Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today to our first ever online ConnecTALKS crisis communication. Where do we go from here? With Jeff Chatterton. It is really great to see how many of you have logged in already. No doubt there's going to be a lot of people joining in as well. Given the current global situation, we felt it was important to continue to share knowledge and advice with you. There is no doubt that these are tough and unprecedented times. And I think it's fair to say that we are all learning how to adapt day by day, and may I say, hour by hour. We want to provide our community with a space to collaborate, seek reassurance, and support each other. We also want to play our part in the recovery and resurgence of our industry, a process that I believe, and I've got every confidence, will actually begin in the very near future. For several weeks now, we have been talking with members of our community about how we can help. Many of you have since expressed a need for support with handling a crisis and how to communicate with customers. So as the first in our series of ConnecTALKS webinars, we wanted to kick off with a special segment on crisis management. Our host today, as I'm sure you all know, is Jeff Chatterton. He is the founder and president of CrisisTether, a division of Checkmate Public Affairs. He specializes in calming fears and helping clients fall up, helping them recover well and succeed following challenging times. So we hope this session will be a welcome insight into crisis management and provide you with a fresh perspective to help and navigate and recover from our current situation. Now, before I hand over to Jeff, I wanted to let you know how it all works and what to expect. So Jeff will be presenting to us in just a moment, but he has also built in a couple of breaks during his presentation, should you wish to ask questions. We will also have some time at the end of the presentation as well. I'm sure many of you have used Zoom before, but if you haven't, you can ask questions at any time during the presentation. There is a chat button at the bottom. It'll appear at the bottom of your screen if you hover on it. If you do choose to use the chat button, you have two choices: to share questions and comment with just the panelists, or you can share questions and comments to panelists and attendees. If you choose this option, then everyone in this webinar, all of the attendees, will see your question. So it's entirely up to you what you decide to do. We will be able to see both. I do encourage you to ask as many questions as possible and as you have. This session will also be recorded, so if you have colleagues, friends who you think might also benefit from this webinar session, we will be distributing this recorded webinar to you towards the end of today. Finally, please be respectful, understanding of one another. We encourage you to have a positive and supportive spirit in these challenging times. Between us all, there is so much wealth of knowledge, insights, and advice that can be shared and help guide us through these uncertain times. So let's use each other for the good of the industry. So thank you, everyone. Jeff, now over to you.
Thanks, Michaela. So I wanted to really just thank everyone for attending and to welcome you. I got to give you a little bit of housekeeping behind the scenes here. What we are dealing with is absolutely unprecedented, not just for the travel industry, but for the economy in general, and in terms of the breaking news and what's going on out there. And so I'm going to ask for your forgiveness in advance. Normally what happens when I do an online presentation like this, I've had a chance to do, quite frankly, a little bit more in terms of rehearsal, a little bit more in terms of preparation. My slides look a little cleaner, a little better. And right now I'm dealing with a whole lot of, as you are, fluid information, a lot of breaking news and a lot of stuff that's going on out there that's brand new, and we're trying to process and figure out what that means. So if I stumble through my words, if I mess up a slide or anything like that, I'm just going to ask for your forgiveness in advance. I am speaking from the heart as we go through this. So I wanted to spend a little bit over about the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to let me walk you through what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at what's going on out there. We're more importantly, as far as you're concerned, we're going to start to get into what can you do about it and how can you do that. And then when that's done, we're going to take a break in the middle of all that for some Q's and some A's. If you have some questions, please do not hesitate. Go ahead and punch that in the chat window. Gemma or David or Michaela will see that, and we will bring that up as part of our scheduled Q&A break. Don't wait for the break in order to ask a question. We may not answer it right away, but we will get to everyone, or we're going to do everything we can to get to everyone. But please just punch questions in there as you have them. We're going to talk about what's next and how we can actually recover. And as far as I'm concerned, recover higher than we were before, which is a pretty ballsy statement to make, and I'll give you that. But I firmly believe that, and I have the track record and the experience that indicates that this is more than possible. So I have 4 rules that I work with my clients when it comes to a mass casualty, a catastrophe, a natural disaster, or in this case, a pandemic. And the first one, pardon the bluntness of it, but it really is this simple. You need to embrace it. You need to embrace the suck. And trust me, I get it. I know. Yes, it's sucky out there. Obviously, you may have heard about a little something in the news called the COVID-19 virus. It's affecting everyone. It's affecting every sector of the economy. The travel, the tourism, aviation, hospitality sectors are especially affected. Everyone out there is getting nailed. There are some fantastic opportunities of resilience. There are some fantastic stories that are out there that I keep stumbling across. But in the meantime, we have entire sections of the economy that are hurting right now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mark Cuban. Mark is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks in the National Basketball Association. He is a host on a TV show called Shark Tank, which is based on Dragon's Den if you're from the UK. He's a business owner, a very successful billionaire. And he went on LinkedIn and he said, hey, if people have questions about how to handle all of this, let me know. He had over 6,000 comments in the first 12 hours. Everyone is hurting out there. The most stark and visual reminders are when I do a lot of work with the attractions industry. And when you start to look at what's going on in attractions, for example, this is the Raging Bull on Wall Street. If you've ever been to Wall Street, actual Wall Street in New York, there's a statue, and it's fairly popular. You've got all the tourists, and people like to go and get selfies. This is a picture of the bull taken on March 16th. And the problem with that is that not only is the bull lonely, but so is the hot dog vendor, and so are the hotels around the bull, and so are the airlines that fly people in to see the bull and everything else like that. And I get it. It's not fun out there right now. It is a rough time. So in that comes some opportunities. But as part of those opportunities, that brings me to my second point, which is, so you've been hit in the face. You've been punched in the gut. You're absolutely reeling. You're stumbling. You're questioning yourself. You're questioning your business. You're wondering what on earth you're going to do right now. My first piece of advice I give to every travel and tourism company owner when they're dealing with a situation like that is, don't react to what's going on out there. Now, it's a pretty odd statement, but I like to think that, what do you call a reactive organization? I call them bankrupt. Your job is not to react to what's going on. Reacting is dealing with stuff that's already happened. Your job is to proact. I want you to get out in front of what's going to happen so that you can be better prepared to deal with the changing economy as we go. When you have the ability to sit and figure out how to communicate to the people when there is changing news, when the gates open up, when the airlines start flying, when the cruise ships start filling up again, you need to be able to have a plan to get your customers back. Because if you don't have a plan to get your customers back, you're not going to get your customers back. So what's involved with that? Well, the first advice I give to people at this point is brainstorm, get creative out there. It's not going to be like every other tourism marketing economy. If you've ever opened up, Condé Nast magazine or Destinations or any, typical marketing play, vanilla marketing is not going to work anymore, guys. It's just not going to work. It may eventually. Give it 4 months, give it 6 months, everyone calms down, it becomes the new normal, everything's fine. That's great, but I'm assuming you don't want to wait 6 or 8 months before you start getting your flow of clients back. So start figuring out where you've got some opportunities. What are the low-hanging fruits that you've been, quite frankly, ignoring up until this point? So as part of that, I want you to prioritize your stakeholders. Now, prioritizing your stakeholders is an interesting exercise. Everyone understands instinctively where your important stakeholders are. Obviously, if you have a massive client, they're an important stakeholder. But I want you to start prioritizing your stakeholders. And that's an actual analytical process. And it involves, doing it formally, writing it down. So take a look at the entire world that's out there. I want you to get creative. When it comes to your own client list, obviously you've got people who've already traveled with you before, people who have already booked trips, people who are talking about booking trips. If you're dealing with a particular cultural organization or a particular cultural region or a destination, go find the diaspora. I did a lot of work with the Ebola affected countries after the Ebola scare 3-4 years ago. And Ethiopia, for example, had great success. Ethiopian tour operators had a lot of really great success working with the Coptic Christian community by putting together a come and revisit your roots type of initiative. That's a market that they just hadn't really been focusing on before to the extent that they could have. Are there different partnerships that you can find? Are there different organizations that, non-traditional organizations that you can partner with? And by the way, the most non-traditional organization that you may or may not want to or be able to, but you could consider partnering with, are your competitors. Is there a region-wide initiative that you can put together? There's all sorts of things out there. I want you to just consider them. Now that's great for revenue side, but then there's also the business operations, because your business operations are going to be dramatically affected. Obviously, your employees. I could ask a question right now. I'm almost afraid to ask the question. How many of you have had to go through layoffs? How many of you have had to go through and tell people, hey, we're not going to be able to hire you, but we want to bring you back when this calms down? There are good ways and there are bad ways to do that. I don't want to see you do the bad ways, but that's a whole other conversation we could have. Are there regulators? Are there civic authorities? Are there civil aviation authorities? Are there neighbors, neighboring communities, municipal officials, city councilors, community leaders, influencers? There's all sorts of people who may not necessarily be clients of yours, but they are important to your ongoing business operations. And then the third category are what I call actual line item stakeholders. People who you buy stuff from, your suppliers. And then, of course, the catch-all, people that you've missed somehow. So I legitimately and honestly, and I know this is one of those things that sounds silly, but I want you to do yourself a favor. Get out an Excel spreadsheet, do it this afternoon, do it this evening, and write down every single organization you can think of. There is no wrong answer. just put them each line on an Excel spreadsheet. Just every single one. You could spend a half hour and just put down names. Now, what you're going to do then is come up with at least 2 categories on the side. Now, I want you to start ranking them. I want you to start ranking. If you have 220 names, I want you to rank them 1 through 220. And I'm going to do it in 2 different categories. On number 1, how important are they to the success of your business? Number 2, how much do they like you? Obviously, a company that really likes you and really is important to you, they're a very important stakeholder. Now, conversely, a company that really is important to you but does not like you, that's an important stakeholder too, but it needs to be addressed very differently. I can promise you that if you spend half an hour and do that little exercise, just by default, you are going to find some very odd insights into your ongoing business operations that you haven't thought of before. So do yourself a favor and just build that list and start prioritizing your stakeholders. All you're doing at this point is figuring out who it is that you are going to talk to in the very near future. Now that you've got that list, you're going to do something a little bit even crazier, and I want you to ignore some of them. Now, I know that sounds a little bit disconcerting. This is the entire universe as we see it, and I will break this down for you. But there are 5 types of people that are out there. There are the 5 audiences, and I'm going to give you the same data presented differently, just so you can understand it. So on starting at the one end, the extreme end, are what I call supporters. These are people like your mom, right? They love you no matter what you do. Doesn't matter what you say. You could come out and endorse, some horrible idea or candidate for president or anything else like that. They like, yes, let's do that. It does not matter. They are absolutely with you through thick and thin. Now, unfortunately, they're only about 1% of the audience. Then you've got sympathizers. Sympathizers are people who really like you. They like you a lot. They like you publicly, right? But if you screw up, they're going to tell you about it. And more importantly, they're going to tell you about it publicly. Now, this is about 3 times the size of the supporters community. These are, I joke, but it's not wrong. It's not inaccurate. I joke that this is your spouse, right? They love you most of the time, but when you screw up, you're going to hear about it, right? These are favorite clients. These are, perhaps, industry partners. There's all sorts of different people who could be sympathizers. They like you, they're engaged, they're plugged in, they know your audience. But if you screw up, they're going to tell you about it, and they are going to tell you about it publicly and loudly. So that's the world. Now, straddlers don't know who you are. They barely are aware of you. It's 90% of the audience. When you look outside your window and you see the people walking by, those are straddlers. They vaguely are aware there is a travel and tourism organization. They don't really care. Pardon me while I have some more coffee. Then there's skeptics. Skeptics don't like you. They're publicly engaged in not liking you. They may be your competitor. They may be working for your competitor. They may be trying to actively discourage tourism in your region. There are a number of people who could be skeptics. Skeptics ask all sorts of really tough questions. Is it fair that you're doing this to us? Why aren't you paying your employees better? All sorts of tough, hard questions that 3/4 of the time they don't like you. They're publicly engaged in not liking you. Every now and then you might win one over. You might, and they'll say it. They say, you know what, I didn't agree with you, but you make a really interesting point. I have to, that's fair. But then there's, at the extreme opposite end, the splenetic. The splenetic is the person who will cut their own spleen out just to spite you. They hate you. It does not matter what you say. You can come out and offer every single splenetic $1 million cash, and all they're going to say is, how come it's not 2 million? They do not ever like you. Now, here is the problem that we run into as business owners. We spend all of our time talking to supporters because, hey, who doesn't love supporters? And splenetics. And why do we talk to splenetics? Because they dictate the agenda. They're the ones who are lodging complaints with us with the Travel Industry Association. They're the ones who are writing letters to the editor. They're the ones who are organizing protests outside your office. They're a pain in the butt. Now, who should we be talking to? So a lot of you are going to look at that giant group in the middle and say, well, we need to be talking to straddlers. You know who else is going to tell you that you need to talk to straddlers? The people who take your advertising money. There's great money in talking to straddlers. I'm here to tell you, save your money, save your business. Don't worry about the straddlers right now. Your job and the best impact you can possibly have for us is to talk to the skeptics. The skeptics are the ones who are asking really tough questions. Why on earth should we visit this particular region? Why should we give you our money? Why should we book a trip when there are travel bans in place? Why should we X? Why should we Y? Why should we Z? All these really hard, damaging, hard questions are difficult to answer. So when you take 100% of your communications initiative and focus it on the 3% of the audience who are asking legitimately really tough questions, that's not even fair, because eventually the straddlers are going to wake up. Eventually the straddlers are going to stick their heads in and come out of hibernation and set the toilet paper rules that they've been hoarding down. And they're going to go, okay, things have calmed down. I guess it's time to go do something fun. I finally need to get away from this place. Let's go do something and take a break. And they're going to hear from two groups. They're going to hear from splenetics who are screaming like chickens with their heads cut off about it's not safe to travel, or you shouldn't travel to this region, or whatever else crazy complaint they may have. You know, sometimes splenetics are CNN, sometimes splenetics are Al Jazeera. Doesn't matter who it is. And then they're going to hear from you. And you are going to be very calmly, very authoritatively, very empathetically answering all the really tough questions. You're going to be doing it in a way that's calm, reassuring, caring, sympathizing. You're going to be able to say, you know what, you've asked a question that we've asked ourselves, that very same question. And that's why we encourage people to come and visit Peru or whatever other region it is that you happen to be promoting at the moment. That's going to be far, far more effective in the grand scheme of things than you desperately running around doing vanilla advertising saying, visit Peru, or whatever else you've always done in the past. Your whole language needs to change right now. The whole marketing initiative, your whole way you talk to your customers needs to be very, very different over the next 6 months as everything comes out of what is an absolutely crazy, chaotic time. So we haven't gotten into how we're going to do that yet. No, that's next. But in the meantime, I did want to just take a minute and ask if there are any questions. I know that that can be a pretty disconcerting point for people. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's all right with that so far.
Okay, so I've got a question here from the audience. Is how would you compare on a local versus a global epidemic, and where are the differences in action plan?
So, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Jeff.
Okay, so obviously I've worked with both. Like I said, I worked quite closely with a number of the Ebola affected regions, and they had some interesting approaches, and some clearly didn't work during the Ebola crisis, for example. The difference between a local pandemic and a global pandemic is that, quite frankly, a global pandemic affects more people and therefore has a better, or sorry, not a better, a greater impact on your bottom line and on the disruption to your business. The good news is it's easier to come out of it because no one blames you. No one is upset about having to go to South Africa or having to go to Kenya, having to go to Tanzania. Um, they're upset about everywhere. Every single part of the economy, every single tourism region, every single airline flight is affected with the same problem. So as much as a floodwater of public concern and crisis has sunk everyone's ship so far, that does mean that they will all rise. Some are going to rise higher than others. Some are going to stay at the bottom of the ocean because they don't know how to rise. Does that make a little more sense for people?
Yeah, I think so. I've got another question from Simone. Thank you, Jeff. Simone is asking, what are you to do differently when launching a new product?
I think, Simone, why don't I'm thinking that sit tight and let's walk through the next little section, and that I think is going to help explain a little bit more in terms of language and structure, some of the things that you're going to want to do differently. Um, there are definitely some things that you have to be very careful about promotion. Right now, if you're launching a new product, I wouldn't. Frankly, and I'm just going to be really blunt, if you have a previously scheduled promotions campaign, I would cancel it right now. If you have Facebook ads, if you have scheduled advertising that's due to go out, I would not do it. Frankly, and I have no interest in scaring people, but we're in a very fluid situation, and your audience and the audience across the globe at the moment are in survival mode. They're not in growth and new opportunities mode. And I think it would just be silly not to understand and to recognize that. California just announced last night a statewide lockdown. No unnecessary travel, and they don't mean like getting on an airplane. They mean no getting in your car. Period. Stay home. And I think that's going to spread. I think we're going to see that spread across most of the United States over the next week. It will get worse before it gets better. But the only good news in all of that is, if you were planning on spending money on a promotions campaign, you don't need to do that right now. I would focus on saving your resources and getting in a better position to launch with some of the stuff that we're about to talk about in 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, when all of this calms down.
Jeff, Simone's interacting right now, and she says, thank you very much. She's understood that. But what if it is for the end of this year? She waits to launch till the end of this year.
Oh, as in the calendar year?
Yeah, I guess that's what she means. So basically, she's wanting to launch a new product. And what can she do when launching differently, and you advised her, actually, you know what, don't launch it, and she's come back and said, well, thank you for that, but what if I launch it at the end of this year? To me,
absolutely, you can launch at the end of this year. My only point is, right now you could launch a brand new space shuttle to the moon and no one's going to notice it. That's the point I'm trying to make. You were trying to compete with 24/7 breaking news and a culture and an audience that has zero interest in listening to anything you have to say right now. And it might mean that you need to accelerate your marketing. Instead of launching in April for a product that's going to come out in the end of the year, maybe you need to launch it in July or August for a product that's going to come out in the end of this year. But at the moment, just don't.
Yeah, I guess it's all dependent upon how the situation, this fluid situation, unfolds, I guess. Barbara Cesario is actually posing another question, which I think is quite similar. She says, I'm creating a new website at the moment. Would you wait for the launch of the website, and would you change the language of it? Would you make it different?
Without having seen your particular website, I can't speak as to whether or not I would change the language or the tone or the wording or the tonality of it. I'm about to talk about language and tone and everything else like that. That might help. I would absolutely. Hey, I'm building a new website for some of my products and initiatives right now, and I'm doing it because there are a bunch of developers who are working from home and looking for projects. So it helps me because they're more responsive and they have something to do while they're working from home, and it's a good time to refocus on your business operations. If you have internal stuff, this is a great time to go do inventory or to go do all of the things that you've always wanted to do for your business that you've never had the opportunity to do. And if part of that is completely gutting and redoing and doing a wireframe and a new section on your website, absolutely go for it. My only caveat on that is that there's no point in expecting people to notice any difference to your website. I mean, frankly, no one cares. And I'm sorry if I'm being a little too blunt, but no one cares if you change your website. People change their website a million times a day these days. That's no big deal. So go ahead and do everything you need to do. Just don't expect a lot of uptake while people are running around desperately trying to figure out how on earth they're going to get their hands on toilet paper. They're in a your consumers are in a different mode right now. The luxury travel market is just focused on salvaging their own business operations. They're not at the moment. They're not looking for other opportunities to get away, and that's frustrating as heck, and I get that. But you have to honor that. You have to embrace that and take it as an opportunity to reestablish and reassess your own operations and figure out what you're going to do to get them back when they do stick their heads up.
And I guess timing of that is absolutely crucial. We should all really be looking at our recovery plans right now.
Yes.
Another question, Jeff, from Patricia. Are there different behaviors depending on different countries? How do you consider culture in recovery programs?
So, you know what? I have worked on all 6 inhabited continents. I'm Canadian, by the way, so I have zero need to work in Antarctica just to say I've done it. but I have active clients in South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia. I have been simultaneously translated in Spanish. I have been simultaneously translated in Swahili. What we're about to talk about in the next 10 minutes or so, in terms of language structure and tone, it's universal. It works for every language, every culture, and it will calm people down. So that might be the good time, Michaela, if you're all right.
Perfect.
Why don't I dive into that, and then we can take on the rest of the questions after. You're good?
Go.
All right. So that's the next point, which is you probably have a lot of facts. You probably have a lot of data. You probably want to share some information. Maybe you're trying to convince people to visit Australia, and you want to convince them that this part of Australia isn't affected by COVID, or Peru, or Paraguay, or any other part of the world. And I'm here to tell you, it does not matter what the facts are. The facts right now are completely irrelevant when it comes to building trust and building credibility and getting people to trust you. I mentioned I do a lot of work with tourism attractions. I am a member of IAPA. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it's the attractions industry. It stands for the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. So, and I'm putting this up as an example of what not to do. If you go to the IAPA website, they have, theme parks and attractions all over the globe are in absolute meltdown right now. They're all closing. They're all laying off staff. They're desperately hurting for answers to, how do I lay off my staff and still get them to come back? How do I convince people that my park is safe? How do I convince people that there's good ways and bad? And IAPA's dropping the ball. IAPA has travel advice and technical guidance and advice and shareable graphics and links to the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. They're all very fact-based resources. And I can promise you, here's the thing, no one is coming to you for facts about the global pandemic right now. They may be going to CNN, they may be going to Al Jazeera, they may be going to the Center for Disease Control. That's fine. They're not coming to you for information about COVID-19. They're not coming to you for what that is. Stop trying to give them facts. So I call it the monster under the bed theory. And by the way, the perspective on this, I am like any one of you. I have an email box that gets filled to overflowing. And in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, I've gotten emails from 5 different airlines. I've gotten emails from my gym. I've gotten emails from software companies. I've gotten emails from everyone and their brother. And they all have the same piece of advice, which is, don't worry about visiting us. We work really, really hard to be clean. And the problem with that is that's a factual response to a non-factual question. Because when I ask United Airlines, hey, are you clean? I'm not really asking if they're clean. What I'm really asking is it safe for me to fly with you? Is it safe for my family to fly with you? And when you come back with, hey, every night we sit there and we sanitize our planes and we do everything to ensure a safe, clean environment, that is a factual response to an emotional question. And frankly, honestly, the last time I flew in business class, no less, on United Airlines, there was crumbs on the seat and a napkin in the seat back pocket from the previous passenger. So I'm having a really tough time believing that they're really doing a good job of keeping the planes clean. Don't kid yourself, we've all been there. So I call it the monster under the bed problem. I'm a parent. I have 2 boys. Thankfully, they're a little bit older now that they don't believe in monsters under the bed. But when my little guy was 6, every now and then he'd be worried that there was a monster in the closet or a monster under the bed or some sort of thing that's out there. And we've all been there, right? Anyone who's been a parent has all been there. And you've got 2 potential responses. Now, response number 1, which is what the industry across the globe is doing right now, is they're going upstairs and they're saying, let me explain to you why monsters don't exist. First off, monsters are fictional, and they will give you a very detailed, logic-based, answer as to why monsters are probably not existent, and that's why you don't need to worry about monsters under your bed. Thanks very much. Turn the lights off, go to sleep, goodbye, right? Or you can plug in a nightlight. You can sit beside them on the bed, give them a big squeezy hug, pat them on the back, dry their tears, explain, hey there, buddy, it's okay. Daddy's here now. It's all right. You live in a safe house. I'll keep you safe. Now, you tell me which answer is going to work, right? And the problem is your clients are that scared little kid right now. They're the ones who are worried about the monster they can't see, the enemy they can't fight, right? You cannot give them factual responses to emotional questions, to emotional concerns. We've actually looked at this. Okay, so if we understand that emotion really is the driver in all this, what are the emotions that you need to have? And we identified 4. There's some really great work out of Columbia University and a guy named Dr. Vince Covello. So let me give you the first 3 right here and now. So the very first one, that blue piece of the pie that you see on your screen, that's the emotion of, frankly, honesty. are you telling the truth? Now, you need to be telling the truth. You can't get away with lying here. If you're lying, you're dead. But even if your audience acknowledges you're telling the truth, only about 20% of them are actually going to trust you. Now, they may believe you, but that doesn't mean they will trust you. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get them to trust you. What are the emotions that go into trust? All right. What else is there? So there's competency, expertise. Do you actually know what it is you're talking about? Okay, here I am explaining that there are no such thing as monsters. Everyone acknowledges I'm telling the truth. Everyone acknowledges that I'm an expert in monster fighting. That's great, but that only means that you could be the world's leading expert in coronavirus. You could be the world's leading expert that everyone acknowledges is telling the truth. Only 1 out of 3 are going to trust you. Okay. What else? Well, dedication. You are absolutely publicly committed to sticking around and doing whatever it is you need to do. You are 100% committed to fighting the fight. You're not just going to show up and then disappear. You are here for the long haul. You are dedicated to ensuring that everyone has a safe environment, which is great. The problem is that you still only have half of your audience. So there's only one big, crazy thing left. Now, this is the big one. This is the golden one. If you get this right, you're laughing. If you get it wrong, you're dead. You're absolutely dead in the water. And the one big, hairy, crazy, emotional need that your audience has right now. And it doesn't matter whether your audience are people who are going to buy tickets. It doesn't matter whether your audience are people who are planning on selling your services to other people. It doesn't matter whether you're business to business, whether you're business to consumer, whether you're business to industry, whether you're business to executives and you're doing corporate retreats. What they need from you right now is empathy. They need to know that you know how they feel. That's so critically important. They don't even have to, you don't have to agree with how they feel. They just need to know that you know how they feel. And it's not understanding how they feel. They need to know that you feel how they feel. I call empathy fire retardant foam. When you've built a house, your business is that house, and right now you've got a room and it's on fire. It's a problem. You need to go in there and rebuild that room. You need to refix the room. That's great. I get it. Okay, absolutely. So when that room is on fire, you can walk into that room with drywall and wood and a hammer and some nails and start repairing it, except it's still on fire. It's still going to set all that new stuff on fire too. You need to put out the fire first. Empathy is fire retardant. It's like a fire extinguisher. Empathy doesn't fix anything. All it does is take the energy away. When people are completely geared up, they're keyed up, they're worried, they're scared, they're excited, am I safe? Is my family safe? Are my kids safe? I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know how this is going to work. What are we going to do? Empathy calms everything down. Empathy is the thing that allows them to take a deep breath and actually listen to what it is you're going to say. But you need to demonstrate empathy first. You need to let them know that you know how they feel. And when you've done that, and only after you've done that, then you can go in with your hammer and your nails and your drywall and your wood and you can start to rebuild the room. Does that make sense? I'm hoping that makes sense. It's so critically important for you. So there are some really good ways to demonstrate empathy, and there's some really bad ways. I'm concerned about the virus too. It's a really bad way of demonstrating empathy. You have a right to be concerned about coronavirus, or I share your concern about large crowds. The problem with statements like that is that all you're doing is reaffirming the negative again. All you're doing is hearkening back to exactly what it is that they're talking about, and you're demonstrating your moral and intellectual superiority. You're not actually explaining how that you understand how they feel. I'm a big fan, and anyone who's ever worked with me knows that I am a big fan of. I've asked myself that very same question. I think that's my go-to. Hey, I understand that you're concerned about getting on a plane, and that's a tough question. And frankly, I've asked myself that same question. Here's what I can tell you. Boom, you're off and running. I looked into this because I know that it's important to you. I recognize that this is an important concern for you. So we looked into that. And here's what I can say. You've raised an issue which means a lot to me. Things like that are an emotional response. We're focusing on their emotions. We're not focusing on the facts. We're not focusing on transmission rates. We're not focusing on community transmission or viral counts, or whether or not they have Lysol wipes, or how clean you are on everything else like that. When someone says, "Hey, I'm worried, I want to cancel my trip," okay, can you tell me more about that? By the way, that's anytime someone throws a big, scary, damaging question at you, my favorite response, and I use this for professional venues, I use this for frontline customer service agents all over the globe, is, can you tell me more about that? Because frankly, oftentimes, here's the secret, they're not expecting that. They're expecting you to defend whatever it is you're doing. Say, for example, someone comes to you and says, "I'm pissed off. I don't want to go to Peru anymore. I want you to give me my money back," right? They're expecting you to fight. They're expecting you to say, "Well, no, let's take a look at this. Hey, this is why you're wrong," right? Don't do that. Come at them from the back end. Okay, that's a concern. I looked into that. I recognize it's important to you. Can you tell me more about that? Well, I don't want to go because I'm worried about travel. Okay, so tell me more. Why are you worried about travel? Actually engage. They're not expecting it. I can promise you, they're not expecting that kind of a response. And what you're doing is you're demonstrating that you care about how they feel, and you're finding out what's really going on. You're finding out what the real issue is, and after that, then you can come in with empathy and caring and concern. But the empathy is so critically important. It's the fire retardant foam that just calms everything down, and then you can look at rebuilding your house. But I want you to take a look at every single communication you send out to the public, every single piece over the next, honestly, I bet this is going to take at least 6 months. And figure out, what are we doing to explain to people that we understand how they feel, that we know how they feel, that we feel how they feel. Because there is no such thing as too much empathy right now. And finally, the last big piece of advice, honestly, and it's a really short and blunt and quick point, but do not try to do this on your own. You can't do it. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be flippant. You can't do this on your own. You can't do it on your own for two reasons. A, you're too close to it. I promise. I don't care if you're the business owner and someone is asking really tough questions about your business. The stuff on the back of your neck stands up. You need an impartial third party who can say, actually, that's a legitimate question. What can we do about that? And someone who frankly gets it, who understands it, who knows how to infuse empathy in communications. If you have a crisis person that you work with, that's awesome. This is not traditional marketing. This is not the time that you want your traditional communication staff, your traditional marketing team, because they're probably fantastic at getting people to buy tickets in good times, but there's a very different science and a very different school of persuasion and methodology that goes on in the midst of a crisis. I've been there. I've seen it. I know it. I'm looking at. I have actually a few of my past clients here in the attendees list that could probably vouch for this. It's a very different school of thought. It's a very different methodology that goes into everything you've ever done. I explain it's a lot like trying to do heart surgery on yourself. I don't care if you're the world's best cardiac surgeon. You don't do heart surgery on yourself, right? You can't do it. So please do yourself a favor. Find a third party. Maybe it's a trusted advisor. Maybe it's a friend. Someone impartial, someone who's not afraid to call you out on your own crap. Someone who can say, I get what you're trying to do, but that's not the way you want to do it right now. And can act as a sounding board, can give you the advice that you need, it can walk you through it, can do all the things. Don't try to do this solo. And I get that. Sometimes people get really frustrated. No one knows my business better than I do. Absolutely. No one's claiming that people know your business better than you. You're the world's leading expert in your business. And that's precisely why you don't want to be the one who's coming up with some of the decisions on communication, because you're talking to an audience that aren't experts in your business. You're talking to an audience that have weird questions that you've probably never even thought about in the last 20 years because, frankly, you're an expert in your business. I can talk to you all day long about, key message tactics. That would be silly because you're not an expert in what I do, and I just naturally default into language like that. So I have to use different language, different terms, different terminology. That's what I'm suggesting. Find someone who isn't related to your business, understands your business, absolutely, but doesn't have a vested interest and can walk you through how to reshape your marketing, your languages, your communications, your language to your own employees, the language to your own stakeholders and your supporters and everything else like that. So with that in mind, I am going to hand it back over to, I'm going to just real quick, actually, let me walk through this. The 4 points, look, embrace the suck. It's bad for everyone. That means there is a ton of opportunity out there. At the end of the day, here's what I can predict. I can predict that some tourism companies, they're going to go bankrupt. I know it. And I'm sorry for being blunt about that, but we all know it's true. But that does mean that some tourism companies are going to buy distressed assets for pennies on the dollar, and they are going to be in a fantastic position for future growth. I want to see you harnessing opportunities, not being the guy who's selling off your assets. Find your friends. Create a plan to win them back, or you will not win them back. It is that simple. Find them, prioritize them, figure out who it is you need to talk to. Remember, it's not about facts. The people won't remember facts. They will remember how you made them feel. And finally, get some help. It is impossible to do this on your own. With that, Michaela, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. It's really interesting stuff, especially the empathy message. There's been some conversations happening in the chat in the background. I've got one question from Laurie. Can you provide some examples of interesting marketing campaigns you've seen in past crises that could be effective for us in the future to look at?
That is a really great question. Yeah, I've seen them. Do I have them off the top of my head? No, I'd have to go back into my files and look at some of the really great stuff that's been done out there. And frankly, and I don't mean to be flippant about this, it's a whole lot easier to find campaigns that have missed the mark because there's a whole lot more of those. And frankly, don't make the mistake of thinking that what worked back then is going to work now, because we're dealing with a global pandemic and not a regional pandemic. The very nature of what it is we're up to isn't going to play. I remember there was some, for example, and I'm totally winging this, so forgive me if I kind of stumble my way through this, but Ebola back, what was that, 2014, 2015? No, it was later than that, maybe 2016. Anyway, doesn't matter. Ebola was way the heck up in northwestern Africa, and as anyone who's ever worked in African tourism knows, all the tourism markets are effectively in southern and eastern Africa, and they were trying to point out. They spent months trying to point out, hey, how far away that is. There was all sorts of campaigns about. Hey, look how big Africa is. Hey, look how many countries you could fit inside Africa. Look at the distance. And the problem with distance is that it's a fact-based response to an emotional problem. And South Africa, which used to run a campaign saying there is no Ebola in South Africa. That's a fairly clear, straightforward point. There's no Ebola in South Africa. Changed their messaging. And I worked with the SATSA, which is the South African tourism people. And one of the messages that a few people developed was, we are sending nurses and medical staff to the Ebola affected area. And that did two things. A, it says we don't have Ebola, and B, it says we're caring and empathetic and we care about our neighbors, right? And that was far more effective for them, because it is a more of an emotional answer than just a simple, we don't have Ebola. And there was some communication supports around that I could find in my archives of material, but not right here and now in the middle of a webinar, if that makes sense.
I think that's really helpful. And also to let you all know, guys, that we've got, if you want to ask more questions on a one-to-one basis, Jeff has made himself available after the webinar as well, and we'll create some time for you. So I've got one question more. How do you handle clients where in this scenario, they just don't listen and even empathy doesn't work? I have been facing clients lately completely in panic and just not listening at all. I guess it's a tricky one, isn't it?
So, and again, I don't know the questioner, and I don't know the context, and I don't know the environment. I would say, right now, everyone is panicking. Anyone who's ever tried to go to, their grocery store to buy toilet paper in the last week understands the panic that is out there. I think part of it is just patience and understanding that everyone is panicking right now. And it depends on what it is they're trying to do, and it depends, like, are they trying to get refund requests? Are they trying to postpone? Are they trying to delay? I would argue that if, and I mean this to sound way less pejorative than it is, but the people who, if you're complaining about empathy not working, I would argue that you're probably not doing empathy right. Because what people desperately need, and they're all looking for right now, when they're yelling and screaming and being panicked, is someone to listen to them. That's why they're yelling. They're being louder because they're trying to get someone to listen to them, right? So what are you doing to actually acknowledge that you've heard them, that you can get it, that you can calm down and have a good and rational and calm? They're desperately looking for that in their life. It may take them an extra day to get there, but when you can be that person in your life, in their life, that puts you in a superstar position. That puts you in a position of authority. The best example I want to give you is a lot like being a doctor. You know, I don't care what bad news your doctor is going to give you. You may yell at your doctor. You may be upset. You may punch a wall. But when your doctor is there and doesn't respond emotionally and doesn't storm off and doesn't hang up the phone and just says, it's okay, it's all right, Jeff, talk to me. What do you want to know? Eventually, I'm going to calm down and go, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my future? Right? And I'm coming to that doctor as an authority figure. I'm looking for information from them. You have the opportunity to be that doctor. But but there does need to be some venting at some point.
Yeah. There's another question from Jose. No one knows how long this uncertain time is going to last, but his question is, when is it good to act to win them back?
Jose, I'm not going to lie to you. If I had the answer to that, I could make a fortune. I can give you predictions. Honestly, I think it's going to get slightly worse before it gets better. I think the North America market is going to go into quarantine, much like Italy and Spain has. I think that's going to happen. It's probably, if I were to completely come up with an answer off the top of my head, another 2 or 3 weeks. And then at some point, it doesn't matter how bad the news is, what you're going to start to see is the second stage of grief, or whatever the third stage, whatever stage of grief is, acceptance. I think people, it will just become the new normal. It will just become what people have learned to accept with. And at that point, they are going to start to look to, okay, well, what's next? It's not going to be this week or next. I think it's going to be at least 2 to 3 weeks, or a month, or even 2 months. I don't think it's going to be a year. I think there's definitely going to be some rough waves before we get to that shore. But there is a shore coming.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, I realize it's the hour is over. So what I wanted to do is to thank very much Jeff for his invaluable insight. I found it very insightful personally. I'm sure many people found the same too. So thank you so much for being here, Jeff. And thank you everyone for being here and listening and contributing. Now, we will be sharing this as a recording. The travel industry is one of the most resilient industries. It's the first one to be hit, but the first one to come back. So we need to be ready when the comeback comes. I'm pleased to say that Jeff has graciously agreed to open up some of his time on his calendar. So if you want to discuss your particular situation with him, I'd urge you to take advantage of that. You can book it. You can book in his own time. You just need to go on www.bookwithjeff.com. I've done that myself. It works. It's amazing. It goes in instantly in your calendar. Our next ConnecTALKS webinar will be focused on the recovery of the luxury weddings sector, which is on Tuesday, the 7th of April at 2 p.m. BST. We also have a ConnecTALKS webinar focused on the luxury incentive market, and that's scheduled to go on the 21st of April at the same time. We will send details nearer the time. It has to be said now, more than ever, our industry must stay connected, and we are very excited because we're launching ahead of time a brand new digital product for members of our community on the 1st of April. It's not April's Fool. It will be launched on the 1st of April. The platform will allow you to see all our connection leaders, who they are, where they are from, what they're doing. It will allow you to connect and chat with each other, to discover all our exclusive benefits and benefits of the suppliers within that community, and to learn more through our online educational program, which has just been kickstarted today. So for members who are with us today, a reminder that your personal link to access this community will be sent on Wednesday, the 1st of April 2020. For those new to Connections, please get in touch if you're interested in joining. And that's just left me to say that we are here to help. If we can lend a hand, whether that is a big hand or a small hand, or if you are just in need of a comforting conversation, we are here for you. So wishing you all a happy and healthy weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and goodbye, everyone.